Hello, you're listening to IWBC's Brass Flexibilities series. This series highlights the innovative, creative projects our members are using to create modern music careers and honors the artistry and accomplishments of these talented individuals. I'm your host, Lauren Rudzinskis, and in this episode, we get to hear from Dr. Ann McNamara. Ann McNamara is the Associate Professor of Trumpet at Illinois State University, where her duties involve teaching applied trumpet, conducting the trumpet ensemble, and performing in the ISU Faculty Brass Quintet. In addition to her duties at ISU, Dr. McNamara works regularly as a freelance trumpeter, including recent performances with Heartland Festival Orchestra, Athena Brass Band, Sinfonia da Camera, Falcon City Brass Band, Champaign-Urbana Symphony, Louisville Orchestra, and Louisville Master Chorale. In addition to performing, Dr. McNamara is productive in terms of scholarly and creative activity. Between 2020 and 2024, she worked on a major research project which resulted in 2 articles outlining the history and qualitative experiences of non-male trumpet professors. Ann also actively pursues the commission and performance of new works, such as her commission of Roy Magnuson's Through the Night, Dark and Drear, and Thoughts and Prayers, Carson Kuhlman's Sonata for Flugelhorn and Piano, and the adaptation of Kevin McKee's A Winter's Night. She is also very active as a clinician and educator, giving many university and high school master classes each year. She also regularly presents and performs at the International Trumpet Guild Conference and the International Women's Brass Conference. She is also actively involved in the International Trumpet Guild and served as the chair of the ITG Young Artist Award Committee from 2019 to 2024. Our first question today for Dr. Ann McNamara is, as a renowned trumpet pedagogue, what is your teaching philosophy?
In summing up my teaching philosophy, the way that I approach teaching each individual student is I have one common goal in mind, and that's I feel it's my job to get each student to become the absolute best trumpet player and, more importantly, musician that they can, basically helping them reach their full potential. And obviously that can be tricky depending upon how much time you have to work with a student, whether it's over 4 or 5 years or just a semester. But with that, with wanting to push everybody to be the best musician they can be, I don't think that there's really such a thing as a one-size-fits-all curriculum. You know, there are going to be some students who come into my studio ready to go with some of the hardest repertoire out there, and there are going to be others where it's going to be their very first time having a private trumpet lesson. So, I have this large curriculum that I use. Of course, a lot of the standards such as Arpin, Clark, Bylin, etc. And then I try to tailor fit it to fill the needs of that particular student. I also really strongly believe in showing each student the importance of having a daily fundamental routine. And for a lot of students, just teaching them how to practice, particularly students coming from high school into college. Again, depending upon what their experience was in high school, they may not really know how to practice. Dave Bilger came up with a mnemonic, who I actually learned about that mnemonic from Chris Carrillo, the trumpet professor at JMU. So this concept of safari, every single day that you practice, you want to cover sound, articulation, flexibility, agility, range, endurance, and then I also added the E word, efficiency. It's safari spelled with an E on the end, not an I. And so that's kind of where I start, is teaching the students how to construct a warm-up routine that covers all those areas every single day, and then getting into repertoire.
What has been your most positive musical experience?
Okay, when asked what is my most positive musical experience or my favorite public performance, that's almost an impossible question to answer. So I'm going to tweak it slightly, and I'm going to talk about a recent performance experience that was just fabulous. And that's this past May, I had the opportunity to perform flugelhorn with the Athena Brass Band for the first time. And, I can remember some of the first music conferences I attended. I believe it was an ITG conference where I heard Athena Brass Band play, and I was just blown away. Of course, doing my undergraduate degree at James Madison University, playing in the brass band there, I have a very warm space in my heart for British-style brass bands. I love the flugelhorn, I love cornet, etc. But not only hearing this band play with such phenomenal technique and musicianship, but the fact that it's a stage full of women playing brass and percussion instruments. It was just very inspiring for me. So to finally get the opportunity to perform with them in Louisville, Kentucky this past May, it was just a dream come true. It was super fun.
Has there been any quote or phrase that guides how you approach trumpet performance, teaching, and research?
One quote that often comes to mind, both for me personally, as a trumpet player and a musician who's constantly trying to grow and improve, but then certainly when I work with my students, is by researcher Dr. Brené Brown. And if you're unfamiliar with Brené Brown, I strongly encourage you to check out her books. My favorite is The Gifts of Imperfection. And so in that book, she has a quote. I have it here because I have it hanging in my office. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when, in fact, it's the thing that is really preventing us from taking flight. As a perfectionist, as many musicians are, I think that's a really great way of both sort of centering some self-compassion, but also kind of having a dose of reality, which is, sometimes you can get so hung up on being note perfect that it lacks any sort of expression or creativity, or essentially just sort of getting in your own way. So I really like that quote, and that's why it will always have a permanent space in my office here. And then, to be perfectly honest, another, I guess you could say it's a quote, or it's sort of like a rule of thumb for me as a person, but certainly as an educator, is just sort of following the golden rule, right? And treating others how you want to be treated. I think it's really easy, particularly in the music world where egos are, running rampant, etc., to take things personally, particularly if someone else is interacting with you in a way that, is grumpy, to put it kindly, or disrespectful. But I think just treating others with kindness and grace, that way, certainly I'm not perfect, but I hope that if I treat others with that grace, they'll give it back to me. And also treating ourselves with kindness and self-compassion.
On your website, you showcase all of the versatile aspects of being a trumpet player: performance, teaching, being a clinician, recording albums, commissioning new music, researching different subjects, creating new classes and workshops, publishing, presenting articles, taking part in IWBC and ITG, and more. Do you have a favorite or a few favorites from this list, and if so, why? How do you encourage upcoming artists to diversify themselves?
One of the many perks of being a college trumpet professor is that I'm required and certainly encouraged to pursue a lot of different creative research avenues. So of course, as the trumpet professor, I'm expected to perform, and I love performing. So whether that's giving solo recitals, which is sort of my favorite way of expressing myself, to playing with an orchestra, to performing in our faculty brass quintet, soloing at various places, etc., that certainly counts towards creative research. And that's important for me to keep my chops up as a performer. And in particular, when I give solo recitals on campus, that's a great opportunity for me to show my students what I can do, both musically and technically. But other things that count towards creative research are things such as recording an album, commissioning new works from various composers, or arranging trumpet ensemble pieces. And then more traditional research that could also be expected of a professor at a university are things like writing articles, etc. And so I was asked, but with all those avenues that I pursue, what's my favorite, or what are a few favorites? And to be quite honest, I would say I really pretty much equally enjoy all of them. The one that I think surprised me the most was how much I enjoyed recording my solo album, A Winter's Night, which came out in 2019. It featured a couple pieces that I commissioned, such as Carson Kuhlman's Flugelhorn Sonata and Kevin McKee's arrangement of his piece that was originally for trombone and piano, and then I asked him to do it for flugelhorn and piano, A Winter's Night. I also got to perform another one of Kevin's pieces with my teacher and mentor, Chris Gecker, Under Western Skies. And the reason why I say it surprised me how much I enjoyed that experience, I assumed recording a solo album was going to be incredibly stressful. And, I'm not going to lie. Yes, there were parts of it that were challenging, but being able to be in the quote unquote driver's seat and being able to create this sort of artistic vision, even just helping, design what the CD cover, et cetera, was going to look like. It was incredibly rewarding. And that's something that I would definitely like to do again at some point. When I did A Winter's Night, it was all out of my own pocket because of where I was at in my career. And so I hope that if I do have the opportunity to do another one, that I will have more university resources at my disposal. But I'll also speak to commissioning new works. I think that is not only something that's really fun and exciting, especially to have the opportunity to premiere a new piece of music, but I think it's really important. We have to continue pushing our field into accepting new voices, expanding the repertoire, helping, create new art. And one way to do that is to support our composer colleagues and help them create new works.
You recently wrote an article that was published in the International Trumpet Guild Journal entitled The History of Women Trumpet Professors. What was your inspiration for researching and writing this article? Do you believe that we can help bridge the gender gap for female trumpet teachers and university professors?
One research question that I've had in my mind for as long as I can remember is, what is the history of women trumpet professors? How many of us are there? When was the first woman trumpet professor, et cetera, et cetera. And, to be perfectly honest, I decided to use the downtime of the pandemic to finally dive into this research project. So, back in the height of the pandemic, 2020, when I realized that my performance opportunities were going to be really limited, I was like, well, this is a good time for me to reach out and interview women and learn from them and hopefully put together a historical timeline. And I found that whole research project to be very, very rewarding. Not only did I get to interview over Zoom so many of these women that I look up to and am inspired by, but it was also really validating to hear about all the experiences that we share in common. So I interviewed approximately 24 currently living women trumpet professors, either retired or currently working. I also looked at several resources such as Dave Hickman's famous trumpet players book, of course, looking at the articles that have already been printed in the International Trumpet Guild and IWBC. And I was able to put together a timeline dating back to 1942, when the first woman trumpet professor, Mabel Lyack, taught at the University of Denver, up until, at that time, present day, which was 2021. And I learned a lot from the experience, and it felt very rewarding to me to actually have an article printed in the International Trumpet Guild documenting this history. I'm currently working on the second half of that project. Last year, I was able to get some grant money from my university to hire a research survey methodologist to help me make an online, fully anonymous, qualitative survey that I was able to send out. I believe I sent it out to a little bit over 100 different women, and I got 60 some responses. And so right now, this summer, I'm combing through those responses, collecting qualitative data, and I hope to, again, publish a second article detailing those experiences of those women. A question that was asked is, do I think it's possible to bridge the gender gap in the trumpet community? Or kind of like any sort of commentary, things that I learned from this research project. And what I would actually say is, in terms of bridging the gender gap, I think it's widely understood that your gender has zero impact on how well you can play the trumpet or how good of a musician you are. So that's great. That didn't always used to be the case. However, based on my research, current women trumpet professors in the field, in the United States, that is, make up approximately 9% of the trumpet professor workforce, meaning that 91% of the existing trumpet professors are men. So it will be really interesting, say, by the time I reach the end of my career, hopefully, quite some time from now, be interesting to see, how much further that percentage gets.
Lastly, we have our final question that we ask everyone. Money aside, time aside, if you could do anything, what would your dream project be?
In speaking about dream projects, the main thing that comes to mind for me right now is pursuing opportunities for having societal change and impact married with musical performance. So one example is a project that I pursued this past year. I commissioned one of our composition faculty members here at ISU, Dr. Roy Magnuson, and he wrote a solo unaccompanied trumpet piece for me entitled Thoughts and Prayers, which is, I guess for lack of a better term, inspired by the horrific gun violence that haunts our country right now. And so with the performance of the piece, it's aleatoric in the sense that there are a lot of different choices where you can either sort of play more atmospherically, lyrically, kind of in the style of an elegy, all the way up to something that's very, very technically demanding and kind of angry sounding, sort of rageful protest song. And the idea behind this piece was that I wanted it to be solo unaccompanied trumpet so that it would be really portable. You could perform it either in a concert hall or you could perform it on the steps of the State House or wherever it feels appropriate, wherever you're called to perform it. And so I gave the premiere at a local Moms Demand Action meeting, of which I'm a member. And I plan on performing it a couple more times this coming year. And I was very grateful to have a large community of other trumpet professors and performers who joined that commission and should be performing it as well. So with that, it's hopefully raising awareness about gun violence in our country. And it also is accompanied with a short movie playing on a screen behind the performer that then prompts any audience members who feel so moved to donate to organizations such as the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions or everytown.org. So I would love to pursue other pieces like this that could have some sort of societal impact, even if it's small.
We'd like to thank Anne McNamara for this wonderful interview. In addition, we'd like to say a special thank you to volunteer Tatiana Geisler for creating the questions for this interview, and Madeline Lee and the performers of Monarch Brass, who you can hear in the intro and outro music performing IWBC's 2025 commission, Rise. Please visit our website, myiwbc.org, or social media to